Most of you know that full doses of GLP-1s are like Ozempic, for example, can be detrimental to your musculoskeletal system. So you're going to lose a lot of weight, almost for sure. You'll drop weight. You'll become smaller. But unfortunately, you're going to lose some of that weight in your bone mineral density, which is devastating, and in your muscle mass, which is also devastating. So we've watched people lose weight and look absolutely horrible, like really old and frail. Flatter glutes. We just talked about glutes. Like, you don't want to lose your glutes. It's very, very important for health and longevity and for aesthetics. So flatter glutes can come as a result of using full doses of GLP-1s and weaker bodies and weak metabolism. But here's a curveball approach that our med team has found exceptional. I'm Todd Vande Hei, CEO of Stark, and I've gone from vegan to paleo to keto to carnivore, from cryosaunas to ice baths to training like an athlete to being injured like one, enhancing my mobility and optimizing my sex hormones. With thousands of labs and various forms of scans, I'm surrounded by high-level medical doctors, naturopathic medical doctors, chiropractors, nutritionists, and strength coaches, all leading me in concert to a state of optimal health. I'm here to share that journey with you, regardless of your age, your genes, or your medical conditions. This is a solo episode. Today, we're going to get into a handful of different topics. The first one is glutes, our glutes. Glutes as the engine. We're going to talk about GLP-1s. We're going to talk about zone 2 cardio. We're going to talk about saunas. We're going to talk about creatine. We're also going to talk about microplastics and PFAS. We're going to talk about a little bonus round. We're going to talk about the 6-point strength setup checklist that I go through in my head and with my body every single time I do any exercise in the gym. So let's get into the glutes. If you don't fire your glutes properly with every step and every time you hinge, which is your body bending in half, basically bending down to pick something up, or squat the proper way, you're taxing the wrong structures in your body. You've got to turn them on, and everything from your knees to your low back will feel safer and stronger. The core idea here is that you don't need 1,000 banded warm-ups to properly train your glutes, although they do kind of help. You need one consistent setup that brings you to every exercise that you do. And that setup should both activate the posterior chain, which is everything from the back of your neck all the way down to the back of your heels, including your butt, and stacks your joints so force travels evenly through your body. I know it may sound kind of complicated, but once you start practicing, it becomes, I wouldn't say intuitive, it just becomes habit. So the first step is apply big toe pressure when you're lifting weights. And I'm talking about doing curls or deadlifts or squats, everything you can think of. So you apply a light load to your big toe. I'm doing it right now with my shoe to anchor the medial column. And then you do what's called a tripod foot, which is also applying pressure at the same time to the outside of your foot and your heel. So you've got big toe, pinky toe, and heel making up this tripod structure. So it's the heel and the base of your big toe plus a little toe that's kind of rooted down. So that's the proper stress that you want to put on your feet every time you start an exercise. And then your knees should track over the second and third toe. Don't cave in. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a squat, for example, or a lunge where the knee just kind of collapses in the process of trying to do the exercise. And it just minimizes the effectiveness of the exercise. You may get some benefit from it, but you're probably also creating some orthopedic damage in the process. The next step is your glutes. Spread the floor with your feet, and that's going to naturally engage your glutes in that process. Almost think about like zippering your hips forward when you do it. So you're not arching your back like you see on Instagram. You're certainly not tucking your tail. It's right in the middle. So that's a neutral pelvis, which is the 5th point. You've got your ribs stacked over your pelvis, your natural lumbar curve in your low back. Don't dump or tuck your pelvis. Make sure it's just nice and neutral. And then moving up to the upper body, your shoulders should be put into your back pockets. Obviously, you can't actually do that, but this is what's going through my mind and how I've been coached at Stark. Try to put your shoulders into your back pockets. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to show you. I'm literally just taking my shoulders, which are generally up and forward from sitting at a desk and clicking away at a keyboard all day long. I'm going to pull them back and try to engage those lats. I'm not going to arch my back. I'm going to try to keep that pelvis neutral, my lumbar neutral, but I'm going to pull my shoulders back and down. And so they're really engaged. They're packed. That's the term that we use inside of Stark. And then the last step is make sure that your chin is slightly back so that your head is right over the top of the entire rest of your body. So how do you integrate this into every lift? Your squat pattern, you set your tripod, your knees, your glutes before you descend, maintain that pelvis neutrality. There's no butt wink at the bottom. Don't try to go too far to get more range of motion and compromise your low back in the process, and keep those lats packed the entire time. So you've got your hands on the bar. You're literally pulling the bar down around your shoulders and engaging those lats to make sure you got some structure, some strong structure before you begin the movement. For hinges and deadlifts, you lock the pelvis in place. You create hamstring tension by pushing your hips back first with your glutes engaged, and you keep those lats packed, just like in doing the squat that I just described. And then pushes, like with your upper body, same lower body setup to stabilize your entire posterior chain, your toe into the ground, your knees pulled back or pulled outward. Your glutes are fully engaged. Your pelvis is neutral. Your low back isn't arched. Your low back isn't pressing necessarily against the bench if you're doing a bench press. It's all just nice and neutral. And then you pack your shoulders just like I described in a squat and a deadlift, and you pull your chin back so you're not like jutting your chin out and causing potential future neck injuries. And then you begin doing the exercise. You begin doing the press. It can be a shoulder press, a bench press, or whatever it is that you're doing. And pulls and rows, same thing. Tripod foot, big toe down, knees in the right place, pelvis before you pull. The same exact thing. Glutes squeezed. And I know this is just like a lat pull or it's a pull up or a chin up, but just go through the checklist so it becomes a habit. Making this habit doesn't add any additional time to your training session, but it will teach your body how to move more naturally when you're under the strain of a weight load. And it's very, very important, not just for looking amazing, because it certainly helps with that in the short term, but in the long term, over 10, 20, and 30 years, it will enable for better posture and a more youthful experience of life, at least from an orthopedic health standpoint. Carries and lunges and things like step-ups, same thing. Keep the pelvis neutral, keep your glutes of the stance and legs engaged. Every step, basically, no pun intended there, every single exercise, if you really think about it, and this is the way I describe it, they all kind of end up as glute exercises because your glutes are right in the middle, right? They're above and below the rest of your orthopedic chain. They're right in the middle. They inform a lot up from your glutes and they inform a lot below your glutes, which is everything. So your glutes will become stronger and your neural connection to your glutes will become greater over time, and you'll be able to engage them more fully with every single exercise. But it takes a lot of practice. So why it matters is that proper glute engagement does three things all at the same time. Builds the muscle that drives locomotion and posture and certainly aesthetics. That's a kind of a new thing. When I was a young man, tiny butts on women were all the rage. Now it's a little bit different, which is a much healthier perspective on how the human body is designed and how you should be training. Number two, it protects the knees and hips and the low back and shoulders by improving force transfer. Your warm-up becomes built into every single rep. And then three, it helps develop the glute med, which is really important and critical to balance. So undeveloped glute meds, they don't look good. They're kind of flat and narrow in nature. And a youthful set of glutes the glute med is the upper outer portion of your glute. When that's developed, you look younger. And there's a reason. Your glutes actually work well and they enable you to be in a better state of balance, which is critical for longevity. As you know, what happens with many women in particular over the age of 60 is they have a fall, they break a hip, and the likelihood of all-cause mortality skyrockets as a result of being hospitalized. You can avoid that just by training your glutes. And in the process of training your glutes really well, you'll also improve your bone mineral density. But the great thing about checking off that list that I just went through prior to every exercise is that you will not only develop what you want right now, which is, I think, what you want is to look younger, but the same process enables for a greater health span For those of you that are in your later years who merely want to be able to golf forever or pick up those grandbabies without strain, and for some of you younger people who have the foresight, you should be thinking about this too. Like you want to be in a younger body, a more youthful body as you age. You get both, by the way. There's no sacrificing anything. It's not like by doing what I'm saying, you're sacrificing looking good younger so that you can perform better when you're older. You look better younger right now by doing this, and you will look better older by doing this as well, and you'll perform better older, and the experience of life will be enhanced through that process. So for the rest of this episode, assume that we're using this setup on every movement you hear me talk about. Default. This is the default. Always. Every exercise you practice this. You'll see it in every single Instagram video I ever post. You'll see me go through this checklist in my head, starting with my feet, then my knees, then my glutes, then my low back, then my shoulders, and then my chin gets tucked, and I start the exercise every single time, 100% of the time. Well, maybe like 80% of the time, most of the time. All right, let's change topics. GLP-1s without the muscle penalty. So most of you know that full doses of GLP-1s are like Ozempic, for example, can be detrimental to your musculoskeletal system. So you're going to lose a lot of weight, almost for sure. You'll drop weight. You'll become smaller. But unfortunately, you're going to lose some of that weight in your bone mineral density, which is devastating, and in your muscle mass, which is also devastating. And before we go on, I just want to point out that I am not a medical practitioner. I speak from experience in running Stark and working alongside our clinicians and their patients, but I'm not in the practice of medicine whatsoever. I'm merely an observer inside of the ecosystem and a general user of nearly all of our services. So what follows are principles that our medical team uses to keep students healthy while leveraging medications when appropriate as part of the plans. So the problem with GLP-1s is that they're appetite suppressants. They lower appetites really fast. So they're great for fat loss. They're terrible for muscle loss if you don't have a really good plan. So we've watched people lose weight and look absolutely horrible, like really old and frail. Flatter glutes. We just talked about glutes. Like you don't want to lose your glutes. It's very, very important for health and longevity and for aesthetics. So flatter glutes can come as a result of using full doses of GLP-1s and weaker bodies and weak metabolism. But here's a curveball approach that our med team has found exceptional. Smaller doses, not microdosing, but our team uses strategically smaller than major doses or full doses. And the result is really interesting. A couple of days ago, I was discussing this with Dr. Jiha, our head clinician at our Newport Beach location, and he threw out a few gems. This type of dosing can eliminate what he described as food chatter. I've never heard that term before, so thanks, Jiha. But it's kind of intuitive, food chatter. So when you're a little hungry, I get food chatter at 6 o'clock at night or 7. If I work out in the afternoon or evening and I drive home and dinner isn't ready for a couple of hours, and when I say ready, it's not like somebody's preparing for me. I'm not able to prepare it myself. It takes a little while. I'm starving and I have very, very little self-control. And it's food chatter. Every time I open the fridge, I've got this little voice in my head saying, eat that thing, open up the cabinet, eat some of those gluten-free organic cookies or whatever you can get your hands on, especially things like sugar. And when you're a little hungry, that inner dialogue is all about food. So apparently, I haven't experienced this personally yet, but with our students and patients, a microdose of GLP-1s can eliminate that food chatter, or they can minimize it. And the potential in that is absolutely shocking when you think about it. I mean, imagine never getting that uncontrollable desire to binge eat in the evening before dinner. I'm just fascinated by that concept because it's just part of being a human to go through that. Or imagine when you're sitting at a restaurant and a waiter brings you bread and you don't actually want it. That's the elimination of food chatter. Because I don't know about you, but if I'm sitting there and I'm starving and I'm in a restaurant waiting to be served and they bring out bread, I have them take it away from the table because I cannot resist. It is impossible in that state of mind. So they may not eliminate your appetite in a small dose, just the chatter, enabling you to make what I would describe as pristine food choices, like you have steely discipline, but it's synthetic discipline. So he and I even talked about trying it with really healthy people, like he and I. I'm definitely game. I'll follow up with you guys on that, what the experience is like to be on a little tiny dose of a GLP-1 and how it affects my state at the end of the day when I have the least amount of discipline, and I'm the most likely to eat a quart of ice cream. So the scariest issues with these powerful peptides is the loss of bone mineral density and the loss of muscle mass. They're both devastating for your health plan. They can, for certain patients that have serious weight problems like obesity or diabetes, they can be helpful because the alternative is much worse than potentially losing some muscle mass and bone mineral density. But they can be devastating for your health span. But if they're not devastating, if they're dosed the right way with the right practitioner, it can be a powerful lever. And I would describe as ideally a temporary lever. So imagine it enables you to get to a state where I am, where you're merely fighting the daily food chatter, and periodically you win, and sometimes you lose the battle and eat some ice cream. But generally speaking, you're really, really healthy, and just having that tug of war with your mind in and of itself, I think is beneficial. I'm going to try it for a short period of time and I'll get back. In advance of this little experiment, I anticipate not wanting long-term to give up that struggle, because the potential fight with myself to avoid ice cream, I think that battle in and of itself enables me to get stronger. It's almost like a different look at getting myself to do a workout or getting myself to jump into a cold plunge. There's an inner battle that occurs first, and that going through that battle on a regular basis is helpful as a human. It's also helpful in terms of the experience of winning the battle and the impact that has on your mental well-being. It's kind of related to the idea of doing all the hard things that I do in general. I don't know. What do you think? Am I twisted? So back to principles that work with GLP-1 small doses, non-maximum doses. You've got to hit a daily minimum of protein. So the minimum would be 0.7 grams per pound of target body weight. I do about a pound or a gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight. So if I want to weigh 165 pounds, I'm eating 165 grams of actual protein, like actual food, not protein bars and workouts or protein shakes and things of that nature, just actual food. You can spread that out across 3 or 4 feedings. Heavy strength training 3 times a week, or if you're an overachiever, 4 like me, but not 5, not 6, not every day. Like, that's just absolutely crazy. If you're doing proper strength training, you need recovery time. And if you can actually train really hard and you think you're recovering well, and you're doing it 7 days a week, you're probably either not recovering or you're most likely not actually training that hard. So anyway, I have big breaks. I don't train as much as people think. Prioritize things like complex movements, which would be hinges and squats and pushes and pulls and carries. Keep your reps honest. Try to train close to technical failure, but not actual failure. And that means you can no longer do the exercise well. So I may be able to do a deadlift and get an additional rep in, but it's ugly looking. Skip that rep. Don't do it. It's not worth the potential danger associated with an injury. Creatine. This is cheap insurance for muscle and cognition. Stacks perfectly here. 3 to 5 grams a day is about where our clinicians recommend you start. Resistance to over cardio. So use zone 2, which we'll cover next, but don't replace lifting with endless amounts of cardio. It's really a mistake. And I think it's becoming common knowledge, especially among women. It's really changed quite a bit recently. If you still think you should be doing a lot of cardio and that's how you lose weight and become healthier, you're probably not listening to or reading the right books or listening to the right podcasts. Let's talk about micronutrients and electrolytes. Appetite suppression through a small dose of GLP-1s. They can shrink nutrient diversity because you're just not eating enough. So you've got to kind of plan around it, expect the fact that you're going to be eating less, make sure you don't eat too little, and make sure that if you're eating less than you have been previously, that you're eating more diversely, more micronutrient diversity through a broad range of different types of food, including protein. So not just beef and chicken or tilapia like bodybuilders do, a broad range of foods, things like wild game and salmon. And unfortunately, these things are getting very, very expensive, and the quality of your proteins should be really high, but it's cheaper than going out. So that's the way I look at it. And then last but not least, make sure you're tracking your progress. You should be, if you're heading down this road of small doses of GLP-1s and you're doing proper strength training and your food is really good, you should track your progress with a DEXA. It's the only method, a DEXA scan that is, it's the only method by which you can accurately measure body composition changes. And it's not a good idea to try to use your mind to assess whether or not you're making progress. It's not a good idea to use how your clothes fit necessarily as a good measure of progress. Use something that's objective. Don't get wrapped up in a single point of measure, which means that you should have multiple measures, points of measure over time, and take a look at the trajectory. Like, are you heading in a good direction or a bad direction? And if you're heading in the wrong direction, you're losing muscle mass and you're losing weight. So maybe you're losing some fat, but you're also losing some muscle mass. That is not an ideal outcome. That's over a long period of time, that can be a devastating outcome. All right. So just to summarize this, the outcomes that we want are lean mass protection, strength that's steady or rising, fat that's falling, energy and mood are stable. And if you start to see any of those decline other than fat, go back and see your doc and get some feedback. So I don't know about you, but I think this topic of GLP-1s is very, very exciting. The problem that we face with new students is that are sometimes grossly overweight, which means they can't make clear decisions about their health because their brains are inflamed. Just let me hit hard on that. Your brain is inflamed from the food that you're eating and the lifestyle that you've chosen over the last 30 or 40 years. And as a result, you can't make clear decisions about your health because your brain doesn't work as well as it does. And your body hurts and you're fatigued. So imagine taking a microdose or a small dose. Microdose is the wrong term. I got my wrist slapped recently by one of our clinicians today using that term. So use small doses that drop that inflammation in the brain, which a GLP-1 can do. And when your inflammation in your brain drops, you can suddenly start making better decisions about everything. Your brain just works better. And that certainly applies to food choices. So it may be just a temporary treatment. I hope it is, until you get stronger mentally, emotionally, physically, and your belief in yourself because of those accomplishments becomes unwavering. And if I were to lay out the ideal path for me as a patient, it would be, if I started in a really ugly place and landed here, it would be to eventually get off of those medications, not to remain on them forever. All right, next topic, zone 2 cardio. Without the dogma. Zone 2 is a tool, like all the tools that we use. Nutrition is a tool. Sleeping is a tool. Strength training is a tool. Hypertrophy strength training is a tool. Zone 2 cardio is a tool. Doing Tabatas are a tool. It's just another tool. It's not a religion. So I don't get too wrapped into it. Use it for what it does best. Don't become obsessed with it, but don't avoid it. Like, there should be some blend of this into your daily or weekly regimen, rather. Build an aerobic base, and this type of training will allow you to do that. It'll also improve your mitochondrial efficiency, and then you can add intensity periodically where needed. Hopefully you'll have a professional involved that can kind of give you some guidance. If you can't, you can certainly do your own research. There's an endless amount of data. Research zone 2 cardio, research all the other types of exercise that I described. Come up with a blend. You shouldn't be too extreme in any particular one unless you're, training for, a marathon, which completely changes everything, or you're a bodybuilder. That completely changes everything. You get my point. If you're not training for a sport and you're training for health optimization and longevity, which is what this podcast is about, then this is a tool that should be in your arsenal. So the point in using zone 2 cardio is that you should improve in this process fat oxidation, your capillary density, which is how many of the little tiny blood vessels you have per area of muscle, recovery between hard efforts, and your metabolic flexibility improves. Metabolic flexibility. This is the transmission in your metabolism, fat for cruising, carbs for sprinting, and seamless shifting between the two. That's metabolic flexibility. It matters because it enables things like steadier mood and energy, which is a fabulous feature in being healthy. It improves better performance at both easy and hard efforts. So you can perform better at easy things. You can perform better at hard things. It's easier for fat loss and fat maintenance when you have metabolic flexibility. It's a good target, and zone 2 cardio can help with that. So how do you program it? The ceiling minimum for this is 2 to 3 hours per week for general health. You can break it into 30 to 45 minute chunks. I average probably 2 45-minute sessions a week. So I don't really get into the ideal category. I just don't have the time for it. And if I really wanted to lower my resting heart rate, for example, I would have to ramp up the frequency that I do it. You can accomplish this in a whole range of different types of cardio. You can walk at a gradient, which is, a treadmill that's up on an angle. So your heart rate gets higher than just walking. You can walk really aggressively. You can bike, you can row, you can ruck, you can do whatever, you swim, do whatever is joint friendly and feels comfortable to you. Just do it enough and get your heart rate elevated enough. And the target is heart rate elevated to a point where you can actually have a conversation with somebody, but you're kind of huffing and puffing. It's uncomfortable versus going full blast and you literally can't say anything. And going for a walk where you can just have a conversation like you're doing nothing. So 1 to 2 sessions a week, maybe periodic VO2 max type interval training if your joints tolerate it and recovery is really solid. You can pair it with lifts, place zone 2 on non-lifting days or after an upper body session where it's not super taxing. Avoid ruining lower body strength with long zone 2 right before heavy squats and hinges. It can be kind of dangerous. My favorite approach to this particular type of training is using an Aerodyne bike. You can put one in your office and conduct meetings, which I've done many, many times. You just prop up a laptop that's visible or project it onto a TV. You can hop off when needed. Like if you need to go to your computer and type some things in or take notes, just go over it, stop the bike and go and do it. If you have a couple, for example, 2 1-hour meetings in a day where you're on the bike half the time, that's great. I mean, that's really exceptional. You get it done during your workday, which is kind of my goal. It's essentially tricking my body into believing that I'm a hunter-gatherer, that I'm going out and hunting and gathering, and not sitting in an office, which my body doesn't like. We just aren't designed for that. Those are modern approaches to using our bodies, and it's confusing, and it causes a lot of metabolic issues as a result. So if you can use your body the way nature intended, which includes fairly gentle movement, and zone 2 cardio is not aggressive. It's somewhat gentle. You have to do it every day. Just prep for being sweaty a lot, which has become a normal part of my workday. And I know, look, I mean, you got a gym behind me. It doesn't seem weird or anything, but most of my days are spent with people talking about money and lawyers and human resources problems and management team meetings and things of that nature. It's just like running a regular business. I just happen to also have an office that's inside of our facilities, and the facilities include a gym. But if I were working in a regular office building, which was my past, I would have a little treadmill in the corner, and I'd have an Aerodyne bike in the other corner, and I'd have little stand-up desks that can point my laptop wherever I was, and I would make people be around me while I'm moving a lot. There's just no way to really do it otherwise, unless you're retired and you don't really have to go to work at all, which is not my situation. So the markers that you should be focusing on to make sure that you're heading in the right direction are that your heart rate should be trending downward, your resting heart rate. Your HRV should be trending upward. You should also experience an improvement in better energy throughout the day, like it's steadier. And your lifts in the gym, like if you're doing some form of strength training, which of course I recommend, you should be getting stronger, which is in and of itself exciting. So much more exciting for women. I love watching women do their first pull-up. So these things are all indicators that you're doing the right amount of zone 2 cardio. Here's where it's overrated, using it as a weight loss tool instead of creating a greater metabolic base. It's not the greatest weight loss tool. And it's not the greatest fat loss tool. Treating it as a magic bullet while ignoring strength training and eating enough protein and prioritizing sleep, that's also not a good idea. Okay, switching topics. Number 4, sauna. We talk about sauna as a longevity lever. Heat is one of the few recovery tools with real world outcome signals, particularly with traditional high heat saunas. I'm a huge fan of traditional saunas. They're harder to find, harder to operate unless you're in a commercial gym and they have big traditional saunas. I don't think they get hot enough in some of those spaces. The traditional sauna heats from 170 degrees to 200 degrees. So super hot. I'm talking about Fahrenheit, of course, 75 to 95 degrees Celsius. There's strong evidence that signals there are serious cardiovascular improvements that come mostly from this type or this style of sauna. Infrared sauna, they heat you directly with lower air temperatures. And many people can tolerate longer sessions. I certainly can. And there's evidence that is growing that it may spring forward the same benefits, but the evidence isn't as old and deep as those traditional saunas. The dosing that you should use, in my opinion, or based on what research indicates right now, is 2 to 4 sessions a week of a traditional sauna, 10 to 20 minutes per bout. If you can handle that, you might have to have short cool downs between that 20-minute set, like 10 minutes in, take a break, 10 minutes back in, and you can build up tolerance over time. The infrared sauna is slightly longer. For me, the infrared sauna is a little bit more of a practical tool because it's not as hot. And I mean, I'm not recommending this, but I go in there with my phone and I check my emails and I check my Teams. You've probably seen, if you follow me on Instagram, and my handle's @testosterone. That's testosterone, like Todd, get it? I post stuff from the sauna because it's just me and I'm not disrupted, and I can actually crank out some, decent quality content while I'm in there. So I try not to just sit in there and stare at nothing. But I probably should do more of that, frankly. It's just a lot of time in an infrared sauna, 25 to 35 minutes that I don't have because I'm just a busy guy. How do you stack these with training sessions or any sort of workout? You can do that afterwards, but not before. I mean, it's a little bit fatiguing. Your heart rate gets elevated, almost like a cardio session. And by the way, it's a great solution for you if you can't move and get exercise, but you need to exercise your cardiovascular system. You can get your heart rate up by just sitting in a sauna. So like my mother can't move very well, it's a good idea for her to get her heart rate up because of her joint problems, because she needs some exercise of her cardiovascular system or her vascular system. So heat can also add post-workout hypertrophy and sort of a mitochondrial nudge without frying your nervous system. So if strength quality matters tomorrow, like you're going to do some strength training the next day and you're sitting in a sauna right now, keep those sessions shorter because it can put a little ding in your ability to be strong the next day. Replace fluids with sodium, potassium, magnesium, or a good electrolyte mixture that you like, especially if you're also doing zone 2 and lifting that. Let's talk just briefly before we go on to the next topic about cold exposure versus heat exposure. You guys all probably know, if you follow my Instagram, that I love cold exposure, but it's for resilience and for cognition and mental health and mental well-being and some brown fat activation, but I really don't use it to manage inflammation. I use that I approach that from the angle of nutrition, sleep, and meditation and the absence of alcohol. Heat is my go-to for cardiovascular and recovery benefits. So let me say that one more time. I don't eat like shit and use a cold plunge for dropping inflammation from eating like shit and drinking a lot. That'd be ridiculous. And for the other benefits, cardiovascular and recovery benefits, I use heat. I hope that makes sense. I only bring that up because for some reason it seems to be in most people's minds a package deal, cold and heat. And it really isn't necessarily the case. And one word on cold exposure and heat exposure together. You can hop in a cold plunge and then hop immediately into a sauna. You can go back in a cold plunge, go back and forth. That's called contrast therapy. That's really beneficial from a vascular plasticity standpoint, because when you hop in the cold plunge, your vascular system is going to contract because your cold is hell. Pardon me. It's not that. You're the opposite. And you hop in the sauna and your body's trying to release heat and your vascular system opens up. You can see you just get really, really vascular in the sauna. You go back into the heat. So the process of becoming vasoconstricted to vasodilated is a good and healthy process. And if you think about youth, we did this when we were kids. We go outside, we play in the sun, we jump in the pool, we get cold eventually, at least I did when I was a kid in our pool, and we'd start shivering, we'd run around, we get hot again. So there's this constant contrast, and our vascular system was amazing. It just was amazing because we're young, but we reinforced that youth through that contrast, that swinging back and forth from one extreme to another. And as we get older and we try to become comfortable, we avoid these things, which is problematic for our health. All right, switching gears. Creatine for your body and for your brain. Also, a little bonus, why women often feel it more. So if I had to bet on one supplement to help most people with minimum downside, it's creatine monohydrate. More phosphocreatine equals better rapid energy turnover, which equals better sets when you're training, better training quality, and improved lean mass over time. So just let that kind of sink in for a minute. Creatine supports cellular energy in high demand tissues. What's a high demand tissue? It's whatever you're exercising in a strenuous way at that particular point in time. Many report sharper recall, so this is cognition now, and faster processing, especially under sleep debt. This is really interesting. So if you don't get enough sleep, people report being sharper because of the use of creatine, even when they're in a state of sleep debt or training really heavy training blocks. They become better cognitively, even though they really crush themselves in the gym. So let me talk about why women often feel the impact of creatine more than men. So the average baseline dietary creatine intake tends to be lower,
right,
especially in meat eaters for women. So women eat less meat than men in general. It's just without even paying any attention, without weighing food. So as a result of that, and some of the benefits of eating meat is consumption of higher creatine levels, is that women may notice cognitive and fatigue benefits more quickly than men when the gap is larger between that baseline and where they should be, or those supplemental levels that creatine brings them up to. So it's really interesting for women, and it's a low risk, inexpensive, reasonably generic product. And for all of those reasons, I like it. During caloric deficits, or if you're on GLP-1s, to go back to our original conversation about that, creatine provides a small but can be meaningful muscle preserving and brain fog reducing edge. And as far as brain fog goes, you're also going to get some of that from the GLP-1s if you're heading down that road. You're going to certainly get it from exercise. You're going to certainly get it from using a sauna. You're going to certainly get it from using a cold plunge. You're going to get it from sleeping better. So you're doing all these things that will reduce brain fog. You're going to get it from dropping fat and becoming more efficient with blood sugar, like your blood sugar levels coming down. You're going to experience that as well. But this will give it another boost. So I love the idea of hitting a blood sugar or brain fog reducing solutions from a bunch of different angles. So here's how you use it. It's very basic, 3 to 5 grams a day, anytime. Just don't worry too much about it, with or without loading, meaning heavier doses in advance for a period of time and then tapering off. Just mix with water, your coffee or a post-workout shake, or some people just literally down it. Consistency beats the timing. So don't get too wrapped up into the details of like when the ideal time is to actually take it. Just take it. Do your best. Don't stress about creatine, or don't stress about any of these things, actually. Just do your best, because the addition of stress, because of the epigenome, which is an entirely different podcast, will have an impact on your health outcomes. If you perceive something to be difficult, it's going to have a negative impact potentially on your health just because of that perception. So don't get hyper focused and stressed about making sure that you take enough creatine. Just throw it in your backpack, but leave some in the cupboard, on the cupboard, so you can see it, and use it when you can. Side note, choose monohydrate and look for, this is a big one for Dr. Alice and the rest of the medical team, look for third-party tested products, meaning there's not garbage in them and a third party is confirming that. And drink sufficient water. That helps a lot too. Okay, switching gears to microplastics and PFAS, the invisible longevity tax. So this is kind of a scary one, and something that in my household we're very regimented around, and not because of me. I'm just a follower in the household. So it's a critical thing for you all to have on your radar. Again, don't stress about it. Just do your best, chip away, and get better over time. So you didn't sign up to be exposed to these things, but because they're everywhere. They're in the air, they're in our foods, they're in our water bottles, they're in our skincare products and our dish detergent and everything. But you can lower the effects or lower your burden with a few smart changes. Let me just rattle those off. The first one is microplastics, the tiny plastic particles from packaging, textiles, and degraded consumer goods. Air, food, and water. Forever chemicals. But before I get into what to do about it, let me explain what they're actually doing in your body. They're endocrine disruptors. They have metabolic impacts. So if you're having a hard time losing weight or whatever, clean out your household try to get better in this category. It doesn't add a lot of time. It's going to add some cost because high quality products and cleaner products are more expensive. But just imagine that you're using on a regular basis a food or drinking water that's disrupting your hormone production, and you're depressed and anxious and inflamed, and you're struggling with weight loss, and your sex drive is lower. Your experience of life is just dim. That's hormonal disruption. So those experiences may be optional for you, and they may be coming from exposure to things like plastics. They change your lipid profile. They increase inflammation. It's kind of a metabolic shit show, to be honest. There's also cardiometabolic risk. So there's emerging links between microplastics in vascular tissue and higher cardiovascular events, heart attack and stroke. So just imagine that. You've got these little microplastics floating around in your vascular system, and it causes a heart attack. Like, how crazy is that? You could have cleaned up your household products and gotten a great water filter and avoided that. There are also fertility concerns. You probably all are aware that, at least in the United States, for those of you listening in the US, that there are problems with fertility in the US. And PFAS and microplastics exposures are being investigated for effects on things like semen quality and reproductive health. Early signals are concerning, especially for males, but the research is ongoing. The interesting thing about fertility is that when we've had many couples come into Stark who have struggled for a long period of time with trying to get pregnant, and they've given up. They've gone through the whole fertility process. Didn't work. They've given up. They're like, okay, we're not going to have a baby. Let's just take care of ourselves. So they come in and they get healthy. And part of that health journey is cleaning up. At least I think this is like the low hanging fruit, cleaning up like personal care products and the foods that they're eating, and getting exercise and good quality sleep. And guess what happens? They get pregnant. The stresses associated with being exposed to these types of things drop through the floor. And mammals, under stress, they lose productivity. We see this in the wild all the time. We have some hunters maybe listening. They'll recognize that in environmental stresses like a drought or extremely cold winters in the Midwest, the deer population will decline. Mating will slow down. Babies will not be born with the same amount of frequency or density. And that's because the mammals are under stress. Same thing happens with people because we are mammals. And if you remove some of those stressors, we become more fertile. It's fascinating, huh? All right. I got off on a little sidebar there. So for water, use a high quality water filter that addresses PFASs. I don't know if that's correct. And particulates. Minimize bottled water. No plastic water bottles. Those things get shipped around the country in a hot truck in low quality plastic. Plastic ends up in the water. You all know this already. I think this is not like a new thing at this stage. We've been talking about this for 15 years, and it's been difficult to get people to stop. And because there's not a tight feedback loop. Does that make sense? You stop drinking water from a bottle, and it's not like, wow, the next day you feel great. So you merely have to have faith that we understand that part of the human body. That's not a mystery. We know that plastics are endocrine disruptors, and we know when we drink from cheap plastic water bottles that we consume plastics and they stay in our body, right? That's not debatable. To the degree that they're affecting you varies from one individual to another. There's some genetics involved, but overall, it affects all humans. So stop that. Just figure out another way. Same thing with cookware. Ditch the non-stick stuff. Choose stainless, cast iron, or ceramic. There are great options there. For textiles and dust, watch new synthetics before you ever wear them, because your skin is an organ. The things you put on your skin, they absorb into your body. So don't put things onto your skin where you're going to be absorbing toxins from a new, shirt that you get from Lululemon. Vacuum with a HEPA filter. Use HEPA filters throughout your home if you can. Ventilate well while cooking. And then when it comes to food contact, reduce, of course, ultra-processed foods. This is an old topic now. I don't know if it's a normal way of thinking for you, but it seems like a dated concept for me. But maybe for some people it's still new. If you're eating ultra-processed foods, you're just killing yourself. You're making yourself miserable, and it's visible too. It's not like it's just on the inside, and it's going to lead to a heart attack, strokes, or cancer. You look like shit when you're heading down this road. So if you care about how you look, reduce ultra-processed foods. and take out packaging like the flimsy plastic covers and things like that. You've got to prioritize whole foods in this process as well. So the mindset you've got to have is that you got to control what you're consuming without being obsessive about it. So don't try to go to zero and freak out about everything. Just try to go from 100% to like 90% consuming this shit, and slowly tick away and get better and better and better over the years. And eventually in the future, you'll be at 20% or 10% and everything's fine. You get the idea. These are the skills of health. That's why we have this concept that health is a skill. It's not a goal. And you merely need to be making improvement year in and year out. You don't have to actually transform everything and become perfect in the snap of a finger. It's not practical. You're going to fail if you do that. One little thing at a time, make it permanent, and then do the next thing. You have the entire rest of your life to do it. And the experience of going through this process and improving over time, in and of itself, is really exciting. And so I love just adding small changes to my life that have small improvements and have them become permanent. And then over time, you experience the joy that we were meant to experience by being inside of our bodies. All right. We're going to move on to the pocket checklist for the 6-point strength setup that I talked a little bit about before. So I'm just going to rattle this off quickly, changing topics. So use this before every set, every exercise that you do, to turn on your glutes, to protect your joints, and transfer force the right way through your skeletal system like an athlete, even though maybe you're not an athlete. I am not, but I train like one. Let me just rattle these off. Big toe pressure. Remember, we talked about that concept. Your big toe pushes down. It will push your knee out just by the sheer nature of putting pressure on your big toe. And it's going to partially engage your glute med, the upper outer portion of your glute. Focus on creating that tripod foot. So your big toe puts pressure on your baby toe and your heel. And depending on the exercise, you can research this yourself online. Like if you're doing a squat, the foot pressure is different than a deadlift, for example. You're going to have more heel pressure in a deadlift than in a squat. So understand what those minor changes are. Don't get wrapped up into those at the beginning. Just go through this checklist that I'm talking about. But eventually you're going to want to learn like, should I be changing my foot pressure depending on what type of exercise I'm doing, and how do I do that? You'll learn about it over time. The first thing to start with, though, is this 6-point checklist. So big toe pressure, create that tripod foot structure, make sure your knees track, which is when you're bending your knee, you're going to be bending your knee over your second and third toe. The antithesis of having your knees cave in, which I see all the time with a deadlift or a squat or a lunge. Don't cave. You don't have to try to push your knee way outside of your foot, like you see with some people, like Olympic lifters. I sometimes see their knees way out, just over your second and your third toe. It's not difficult. Just make sure that lines up and turn your glutes on. So spread that floor with your feet, and it's going to engage your glutes. Eventually, you should feel your entire glute engage. When I first started trying to do this, when I had what's called literally dead butt syndrome, like I couldn't get my glutes to flex, I would just like tap my glute. If you guys are watching this, I'd literally like take my fist and pound it against my glutes and try to flex it until I found that my entire glute was engaged. My entire glute complex was engaged because it's a complex of muscles. So you'll get good at that over time. It may take a little bit more time at the beginning, but get those glutes to be turned on. Make sure your pelvis is neutral, which means you're not arching and you're not tucking your pelvis. And then grab those shoulders and put them in your back pockets, which is to say they're away from your ears. They're down and back just a little bit. I mean, we're talking like a quarter of an inch, but in that process, trying to push your shoulders into your back pockets, what's happening is you're engaging your lats. And in that process, you're providing greater structural integrity to your body in general. So you're packing your shoulders. It's going to protect your neck. And then the last step is just pull that chin back into its proper position so you're not jutting it out. Make sure when you're doing an exercise, especially something like a pull-up, that you're not stretching with your chin to get that last rep in. It's very, very dangerous for your neck. And do that same checklist, toes to head, over and over and over and over again. And over the course of a couple of years, it's going to become something that you don't even think about, like me. And it will change the shape of your body. It will change the experience of training, and it will certainly change the results that you experience in training as well. So we're all done here. That 6-point checklist was the end. If you liked today's topic, and I sure hope you did, I think that the things that I reviewed with you guys they're really interesting to me, and they're things that I'm doing or will do. And I find them very exciting. And some of them are very basic, which to me makes them even more exciting because that makes them inexpensive or accessible to nearly everyone. So if you like today's topic, don't forget to like and subscribe, and please leave us a comment wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like to learn more about Stark, visit us at stark.health. That's stark.health.